I'm going there to see my Savior, who shed for me his precious blood. I am just cold.
Life and the world has never been a war between men and women. I don't care what you're hearing on the news. I don't care what people are telling you. That is not an accurate portrayal of history. It is not an accurate portrayal of the world at any time, especially not of the Christian world. So anywhere where Christianity has had any measure of impact, this has never been the case. Men and women are not antagonists. The idea that history is basically men sitting on top of a pile of broken down women, feasting and laughing and that's nonsense. Nonsense. Life is hard for everyone, including men. It's hard for everyone. It's hard for women and it's hard for men. It always has been. Always has been. Life expectancy before the 1900s is 35. That doesn't mean that people lived to 35 and then dropped dead. It means that 30% or more of babies died before they were a year old. So people, if you could survive your first year of life, you could probably live to 60. But a third of people, of human beings on the planet, did not survive 1 year of life. They died. Now, life expectancy is very high. And mainly it's because we have decreased infant mortality. And it's one of the marvels of modern life and modern medicine, especially sanitation. You know, we think highly of doctors, and they are certainly very much have a lot to do with that. But plumbers have as much to do with it as doctors do. So, you know, maybe you're not cut out to be a doctor, but you could save a lot of lives by being a plumber. I know it's a crappy job, but, you know, somebody's got to do it. So let's talk just briefly about how life was for men, because if you listen to the narrative today, you would think men had it great and women had it terrible. Now I want to be clear, everyone had it bad. Life was rough. Life is much easier today, right? And it was very, very hard before, but it was hard for everybody. And life is not a bowl of peaches today necessarily for men either. Let me just go through a few stats very quickly. Let's look at war. 99.999% of all casualties in war are men, and combat casualties are men. 99 point, almost every one of them. That's not an easy thing to bear, and that's just deaths. And there are even more so on other things. So let's look at the home. In the home, 76% of homicides, men. 76%. 80% of suicides are men. It's an interesting statistic because more women attempt suicide than men. But men are more violent. And they're not just violent against other people or women, they're violent against themselves. So when a man attempts suicide, he achieves it or attains it much more often than a woman does. 26% of domestic abuse is against men. 26%. It's a high number, higher than you would think. Interestingly, on this, they get 0% of federal dollars and help for domestic abuse. Women comprise less than 3% of the armed forces, and they get full benefits under the VA. Over 50% of rapes are of men. Men are raped. In fact, the UN estimates that men are raped more than women in our world today. 93% of the prison population are men. 99% of death penalty, capital death, is men. Look at the home also. 60% of divorces are filed by the woman. 60% of the divorces are filed by the woman, and 84% of the times women get custody, not the man. In health, the top 15 causes of death, men lead 12 of the top 15, tied for 2, and they only trail in 1, heart disease. And they die of heart disease earlier than women do. Academia. There are 700 women's studies courses in America. There are 0 men's studies courses in colleges and universities in America. Government. In government, there are 7 million more women vote in each election than men vote. 7 million more. It's been that way since 1980. Since 1980, more women vote than men vote. In the marketplace, women control 88% of all retail purchases in the U.S. 88% are under their control. Women handle 75% of family finances. 9% of the women in the U.S. own a business, their own business. At work, 94% of deaths and accidents at the workplace are men. 94% of all deaths and accidents in the workplace are men. The wage gap. They talk about there's a wage gap. Women make less than men. When you adjust for the hours worked, right, and for the occupational choice. So when you take those two things into account, that wage gap practically disappears. There's not statistically there's a negligible amount between what men make and what women make when you factor in how many hours they work and what their occupational choice is. Women tend to choose different occupations than men. Okay? Women choose occupations dealing with people, generally speaking. Men choose occupations dealing with things like engineering and manufacturing, building things, doing things. Things are scalable. People are not. Scalable jobs make more money. It's just economics, right? If you can make 1 billion widgets, you're going to make more money than if you can care for every person you could possibly care for in your lifetime. It won't be very many because time is just limited and you're limited. And you think, well, women are forced to make those choices. That isn't true. In countries where they have completely taken away the pressure of men and women to choose certain jobs over others, you know what they find out? Women choose the professions they've always chosen more so, not less so. So women go into caretaking positions more so in societies that have equalized the playing field, not less. Very interesting. It completely dumbfounded the social scientists who were expecting in these countries like Denmark and these places that they would see the reversal and women would be more into science, more into STEM fields. And we find out that after years of pressuring or to take away or taking away any pressures of social expectations, we have something entirely different than what was expected. So, there is no war. Are some women treated unfairly? Absolutely. Are some men treated unfairly? Absolutely. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that there is injustice all around, and you might be that person who has been treated unfairly, and for you think, well, there is a war on me. But the statistics are very clear. The data is very clear. This is not a war against men and women. Then why does it feel like that? Well, because at work, we have competition, but it's not misogyny. Women say, when I go into the workplace, I am not treated fairly. It's men against women. No, it is not. It is not men against women. It's everybody against everybody. Do you think in the workplace men treat other men fairly? You think that's how it works? I was amazed one time. I was listening to an interview with Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson. I don't remember which one. It was one of the two. And they were talking about the last time they played together, which was in the finals, right? The Lakers played the Bulls. It was the last game that Magic Johnson played, and it was the first time Jordan made it to the finals. And they played each other. And they were very good friends. And they would stay at each other's houses during the finals. That's where they bunked. Jordan bunked with Johnson at his house in L.A., and when they played in Chicago, Magic Johnson bunked with Michael Jordan. And they were good friends, but on the court, they said, whoever's interviewing, they were trash-talking each other and their wives and their kids and anything they could say to get their friend mad. Just horrible things they say to each other. That's how men compete. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you that's a fact. When you go into the workplace, everything changes. Men don't play fair, they play for keeps. Now, women go into the workplace and they find this environment. And it's not the environment they would like to see. Now, we can have a discussion on whether or not corporate America would be better off run from the perspective of a woman and how a woman would organize that company, and it would probably not look like that. And that might work better. I don't know. I'm just telling you the way it is right now. And the way it is right now is not that men are saying, we want to push women down. What it is people are saying, I want to push everybody around me down. I want to win. I want that office. I want that desk. I want that raise. And I'm going to step on anybody who gets in my way. Now you say, well, I know men who aren't that way. And they aren't moving up. They are getting squashed down. That's corporate America. I'm not telling you it's good. I'm just telling you that's the way it is. When you go into the workplace, you women, and the men are being mean to you, you should take that as a compliment. They are treating you like they would treat you if you were a man. How do men outside of the workplace today and as long back as we know in history treat women? Entirely different. The same men. There isn't like these little drone men in the workplace that are mean to you, and then outside there's other men who are very nice. It's the same men who are opening the door. It's the same men who are bowing their head when they say hello to you, taking off their hat and bowing their head. What do you think that means? That's deference. But when you get to the workplace, those same people, they're rough. I know, because it's a different world. You entered into a different environment. Now, the reason I'm telling you this, and this isn't what the sermon's about, but I do think it's extremely important. You should listen to what I'm saying. I'm one of the few preachers on this subject that you women should listen to. I hire women. I work in construction. Not construction like we work in an office drawing plans. I work in construction. And I am one of the only construction companies I know that hires women and pays them what I would pay a man. You should listen to what I'm saying. I am not against women in the workplace. I am for it. My daughter's first job was working for me. She cried her eyes out that she had to go work for me. But I wanted her to know what it's like to work in a man's world and compete with men and kick their butts. And she did. Nothing was more funny than watching all my employees squirm when she was better than them. When it comes to the church, you should listen to me. I am for women being a part of the church in every way that they are capable of doing so. This is not about me saying men are up high and women should learn to take it. I'm telling you, women, if you want to succeed in life, you'd better learn to compete. Now, there may be a time when corporate America changes, and it won't be that way. And then men will have to figure out how to get along in a corporation that is not run on those rules of competition that they're used to. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But until that happens, if you want to succeed, then you better figure out how to fight. Because that's what it is. I want my daughter to succeed in the world she's in. I would love for the world to change and just lay over and give her everything she ever wanted. Until that happens, I want her to know how to fight and how to win and how to succeed. And one thing I've learned in life is if I sit around saying the reason I'm not winning is because somebody is being unfair to me, I will never win. So that's my little life advice to you women for you to succeed. And many of you have. I'm not trying to pretend none of you know this. I'm talking to those who don't. Those of you young ladies may be hearing that there's some terrible toxic masculinity or patriarchy suppressing you. Is going to keep you down and you're never going to succeed. You can succeed. But you're going to have to play by the rules that are in place until they change. However, that's at work. At work, Men look at work as competition. They're not angry at women. They're saying, well, they don't want women to be their boss. They don't want anyone to be their boss. They want to be the boss. This is what you need to understand. And you say, well, they take advantage of my weaknesses as women. Yes, and they take advantage of men's weaknesses. They find any weakness and exploit it. These huge basketball players are trash talking the others about their wife, their disabled child. It doesn't matter. They will find any weakness and they are going to exploit it to win.
That's right.
That's the way it is. But men aren't that way in life. Outside of work, that is not what we see. We don't see it anywhere in history. You can narrow in, focus in on corporations and corporate America and say, that's how men and women are, and there it is. But when you look outside of there and all of the rest of life, that is not what we see between men and women. It is collaboration.
That's right.
Men and women have not been at each other's throats at any time in history. Humanity would have never survived that. Men and women have collaborated for all of history. We have worked together.
That's right.
That is how you end up with children. You have to work together. You ask your parents, you little kids, ask your parents what I meant by that when you get home. That's a conversation they want to have with you. This is especially true in Christianity. Look, you can point to some religions, maybe. You can point to some particular cultures and say they're very dismissive of women. They're unfair to women. They don't treat, and that's true. There are some cultures, there are some religions like that, and that's fine. I'll grant you that. I'm not here to defend all men I'm not here to defend any men. But I'm telling you, in Christianity, which is one of the largest segments of world history has been Christianity, as far as in population, that is not the case. Christianity is the only religion that I am aware of that has doctrinally, historically, and practically repudiated polygamy.
That's right.
Other religions do it doctrinally, like the Mormons, but not practically.
That's right.
Right? Other religions do it practically, but not historically. At one point, Judaism now is doctrinally and practically anti-polygamy, but historically, all the patriarchs, with the exception of Isaac, were polygamists.
That's right.
Abraham was a polygamist. All the tribes of Benjamin, they're all polygamists. Isaac's the only exception. All the kings were polygamists. Christianity, from day one, Jesus Christ established it in the Sermon on the Mount. No polygamy. Paul set forth and said, elders will not be polygamists. They must be the husband of one wife. No polygamy. Why? Why is that significant? Polygamy is one of the best evidences that Christians and Christian men highly value women. There's two ways of looking at how you value something. When you look at religions and cultures that practice polygamy, they value women too. They value women the way you'd value a car or a very valuable gem, like a diamond, right? They value women like you would value a diamond. And more is better. They're very valuable, and having more of them is more valuable. Christian men do not value women this way. We value women as being the one and only person who can fulfill and fill what is missing and lacking and broken in us.
That's right.
And there's only one that can do it.
Amen.
Two would just leave a void.
That's right.
That's how Christian men value women.
That's right.
We don't look at women as a conquest. We look at women as partners and collaborators.
That's right.
And there's only room for one.
That's right.
That's Christianity's view of this. And so when we look at Christian history, we see a history of collaboration between men and women, not competition.
That's right.
And that's what it ought to be. God reprimanded the Jews in Malachi for many of these same things. He says, yet ye say, he says, I'm mad at you is basically what he has said. And they say, why? He says, because I've been a witness between you and the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet she is thy companion and the wife of thy covenant. So you've married a woman when you were young, and now you're tired of her, or you're bored of her, and you're going off and you're trying to find another one. God says, I don't like that. I am against that. And then he says this, and did not he make one? Even though he had the residue of the Spirit? Think about this. And this is the basis of Jesus' argument against polygamy, against homosexuality, against divorce, against adultery. This is the basis of that argument. And the argument is this. God designed things the way they were meant to be. So however he designed them, that's how they should be done. Right? It's constitution by design. That's his argument. And his argument is this. When he could have made as many women as he wanted, it wasn't that he, ran out of raw material. He could have made as many as he wanted. He made Adam one wife. One. And that's God's design. One man and one woman. And that's it. Why? Well, he says why. That Adam might seek godly seed. That he would have to depend upon God and seek from God for this relationship to work. Because he couldn't just say, okay, now you're mean to me, and so I'm going to go to the other one. He didn't make Adam, Eve, and Guinevere, right? So he could just move over and say, well, today you don't want to be nice to me, so I'm going to go with this one. No, they're going to have to work it out. And that's one of the first things we counsel people when we're dealing with marriage. If you want your marriage to work, you have to quit thinking there's some escape hatch that you can crawl out of. You have to realize we are stuck together for life, like on a deserted island. That's right. And no matter how mad we get, there's nowhere to go, so we might as well work it out.
That's right, amen.
The moment you think, but if we don't work it out, then you never will work it out. You have to realize that you are without options. You have to work it out. Have to work it out. And that's what the design paradigm of God is. That God designed men and women to work together. That's how he designed us. I'm not telling you that every man and every woman have always worked perfectly together. In fact, quite the opposite. If that were the case, it would be silly for me to even speak on this matter. No, the point is that we generally don't work well together, but that is historically our position as collaborators. And what we need to realize is that we are being called upon by God to better collaborate with our partners. And this is how we should look at this. Now look, this does not mean that everybody needs to go get married. There's some of you here that are not married and don't want to be married, and I applaud you. I am all for that. And Paul says that if you don't want to be married, that frees you up to better serve the Lord. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm speaking to those who have interest in marriage, and I'm going to try to explain to you that marriage is about collaboration. This is not about the husband's the boss, and he tells the little woman what to do, and she's barefoot pregnant in the kitchen. I am really sick of that brand of Christianity. I grew up under an influence that basically went along the lines of, well, I just follow my husband and I do whatever he wants me to do. Gag. Gag me with a huge wooden spoon. Well, you don't have a brain? I've had women tell me that. They're like, well, he just wants to leave the church, so I guess I'll follow him. Tell him, tough luck. I have the Spirit also. You don't get to just make those kind of decisions. I have a voice too. And I'm not your servant, I'm not your employee, I'm your partner. God didn't take me out of your foot so you can kick me around. So how did God design for men and women to collaborate. He designed them to collaborate as friends. This is a hard thing to learn. Men and women look for very different things in friendship. This is why many marriages, the women have their friends and men have their friends. And many times they're not friends of each other. Because men don't understand what women want. And just, another thing that, I just can't stand is this whole idea that men are these simple, like apes, creatures. And women are these complex people that basically fell off the planet Venus to us. Nonsense. Human beings are complex. They both are. Somebody said, you wonder what your husband is thinking. Believe me, he's not thinking anything. I don't know who you married. I never quit thinking.
That's right.
No, men and women are both equally intelligent. All the studies prove this. They're equally complex, and yet they're very different.
That's right.
And so they have a hard time being friends together.
That's right.
This is why, if you're not married, it's very difficult to be friends with a man, you women, or men with a woman. Because we don't know how to be friends very well together. This takes some time. And sex tends to get in the way of friendship. And when you get married and the initial excitement of sex runs out, then you're going to have to figure out how to be friends.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is very important. It is the basis of any long-term relationship. It's friendship. Real friendship. Not the friendship that we all have where they call you, right? Your friend calls you and vents for 30 minutes and then hangs up. Never asks how you're doing. Not that kind of friendship. That's the kind of friendship we end up having in marriages. Where either the husband or the wife, it's all about them. They're the me monster, right? Me, me, me. It's all what they need, what they want. We need to learn how to be friends. That's how we collaborate with each other. You are never going to be a partner with your spouse if you don't figure out how to be their friend. That means that you're going to have to find some points in common. You have to find some things you have in common. You're going to have to figure out what it is the other person is really looking for, right, when they come to you with something. Now, this has been explained before, but men think that what women want when they vent is solutions. And men are good at solutions. We're like, we'll fix it. Where's it at? Is it broken? I'll fix it. Is it misbehaving? I'll beat it. Just tell me what it is. I'll fix the problem. My wife would come to me when I got home, and she'd say, your children, I'm like, hey, I'll fix it. I'll grab a paddle, chase them around the house. There, I fixed the problem. I did not understand what she was asking for. She was not looking for anyone to get a beating. I figured that out after the last one left the house. She was looking for something else entirely. Same way with men. A lot of times women think, well, I just know what he wants. I say, what's going on? He just yells and screams at me. I go out there and he's under the car trying to fix it, and I say, is it going okay? And he's like, ah! And that's because of a lack of real friendship where we understand each other. That takes a little bit of time. And you know what? Time won't do it. You have to work at it. If you don't work at it, you'll never get there. We must be friends to collaborate. God designed men and women to be lovers. Now, I don't just mean sexual partners. I mean really love each other. Put the other person before themselves. Sometimes that will be sex. Sometimes that won't be. That's collaboration. Caring what the other person wants, not what I want. This isn't just the woman, this is the woman and the man. They both have to think, what is best for them? Let me make my life about what's best for them, not what's best for me. You say, well, that's an impossible thing to do. It's very, very hard. But you could do it once today, I bet. Why don't you start there? Why don't you start there and think one time today, for 1 minute, I am going to think what is best for my spouse. And I'm going to do that. Even if it's not what I want. I'll start with once. Maybe do that for a while. And you'll find and you'll understand what love is. And love is the basis of collaboration. God designed us to be keepers of each other. Accountability partners. Too many women that I deal with think that they can't tell their husband, hey, why are you acting like that? Hey, quit being lazy and get yourself to work. Too many men think that they can't tell their wife, why are you acting that way? Grow up. Now that's less common. Men tend to think that it's their God-given right to berate their wives. Both sides. Everybody needs somebody to tell them when they're acting like an idiot. Everybody needs that. And that's why God gave you a wife. He didn't give you a wife to clap for you. That's why you have kids. That's their job. They think, Dad's Superman. That's right, son. That's right. That's why you have kids. Your wife isn't there to be your little fan club. She is there to keep you in line, and your husband's there to keep you in line, and it's a mutual thing. Women are not the firstborn child to be treated that way by their husbands. Like they're stupid and not spiritual and not valuable, and they don't have anything of importance to say. That is not how a man should treat his wife, because that is not how he should conceptualize her. When he looks at his wife, he shouldn't have to be trying to force himself to say, remember, she has a brain too. A man should respect his wife because she is intelligent. If she's not, what does that say about you? That only a stupid person can marry you. And we are to be keepers of each other. That's how we collaborate. How do we grow? We grow by someone pointing out our mistakes in love. And who better to do that than the person who has given their life to make their life with our life? Who better? Who better? You say, I don't want my wife telling me I'm wrong. Who do you want to tell you then? You want me to tell you? I'd be happy to. You won't like it. Believe me, it'll come a lot better coming in the voice of your wife than it will in my voice. Who better than your husband to tell you you're wrong? Someone who says, no matter what you do, no matter how you respond, I am not leaving. I am with you till death. Who better to give you an honest opinion than somebody that says, I am going down with your ship, whether you fix it or not. But I wish you would fix it. I'd rather sail around the world with you than sink to the bottom of the sea. But I'm with you till death. God intended for marriage for us to be pastors of each other. I know there's a lot of dispute in churches about whether or not women can be pastors, and that's because principally they're misapplying the word pastors, completely misunderstanding it and using it wrong. And I'm not word police. I'm fine when people say, who's the pastor here? I go, hey, that's not the right word, whatever. But if we're going to get technical, and that's what we're doing when we're saying what women can and can't do, supposedly, pastors is not the proper word. They are not elders. Pastors and elders are not the same thing. Who is your pastor? Well, you have a lot of pastors. And if you're married, your wife is your pastor. Now, you may not like that. You may not think that that's biblical, but you're mistaken. She is your pastor. She's probably the best one you have. Your husband is your pastor. Anybody who has won you, whoever it is that won you to the Lord, they're your pastor. Anybody who has invested any significant amount of time in your spiritual growth is your pastor. It could be somebody in this assembly who has no position, no official place in this church, and could be your pastor. Maybe they're not the pastor of anybody else, but they could be your pastor because they care for you, they tend to your soul, and that makes them your pastor. And like I said, our spouses are our pastors. They should be. People ask me who my pastor is. It's my wife. It is her that I go to first when I'm discouraged. She's the one I talk to when I have difficulties. She's the one that comes to me and tells me when I've acted like an idiot. She's the one that corrects me when I'm not behaving properly. She's the one I worry about that I have to give an account to. And I'm her pastor. And that's how God designed us to collaborate with each other. Problem is, there's too much of Christianity that sees women as having no spiritual ministry anywhere. Unless you call sweeping, mopping, and cooking spiritual ministry. Which I wish we had a church that was so robust in spiritual gift that we just had to cater all the food in. Because we just didn't have time for that nonsense. That's what I wish. I wish the women in this church were so active and so worn to a frazzle from preaching, teaching, and pastoring, they just didn't have any time for any of this other domestic nonsense in this church. That's what I wish we would see here. I'm not talking about at home. I'm talking about here at the church. Taking care of the sweeping and stuff. Let's just farm it out. Let's just sub it out to somebody to come do it. We're too busy with the ministry of the Spirit to serve tables. And the spiritual ministry of a woman needs to start in her home. Just like the spiritual ministry of a man needs to start in his home. You can't be a pastor in this church if you can't be a pastor in your house. That's men and women alike. Learn how to pastor your spouse if you want to go have a ministry with other people. Because that's how God intended for marriage to collaborate. Amen. So in a word, God had designed us to be collaborators. God designed the church to be collaborators. Women aren't just to be a collaborator with their husband in these things. In this church, we believe that God designed men and women to collaborate together. This church should not be about the battle between men and women. There should be no struggle between gender here. That's right. Who's on top? Who's in charge? That is not what this should be about. This should be about us collaborating together as best fits our gifts and our callings. Now, many of you here haven't seen your way to collaborating. And it may be because it's not your time, and I'm not trying to put undue pressure on anybody. Everything has its time, and God's calling is real. But maybe you've been called by God. Maybe you have received gifts from Him. And you think, well, I can't do it because I'm a woman, and a woman can't say anything of significance in the church, which is essentially, the position of most Christian churches. Like, women can speak as long as they don't say anything interesting. Well, then she'll fit right in with all the men there. Some of you will get that in a few minutes. Women can't teach. Well, that means they can't say anything. Because there's always going to be some ignorant man in the room who doesn't know anything. So then she can't say anything. That isn't how God intended the church to work at all. And if you read the scriptures, you'll find out. He gave gifts to everybody so they all would collaborate together. I think we should start worrying a little less about what women shouldn't do. Start worrying a little more about what they've been gifted to do. Men have already proven, I believe, that a church without women is not much of a very good church. I think. I think that many churches right now in America, all the women could not come on Sunday, and you would essentially know no difference. And I think that's a shame. I think it's a shame. I think that when one of the women or one of the men of this church is not here, we ought to feel it because you matter. Now, you do matter.
That's right.
But if you hide your light under a bushel and you don't learn to collaborate, well, then you essentially don't matter. You practically don't matter because you chose not to. In your marriage, you matter. There's only 2 people that can make that marriage work, and you're 50% of them.
That's right.
You have to choose to be a collaborator. You have to choose to see your spouse as your collaborator, not as your servant, not as your Lord, not as your master, not as your child.
That's right.
Life is rough. And if you're a Christian and you're in the spiritual warfare, it's really rough. And you need a collaborator. And that's what God gave you in a spouse, and that's what He gave you in a church. Paul says, "He that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife." That's how he starts out. "And she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband." No different.
That's right.
No more, no less than either one.
That's right.
That each are worried about the other. We could apply this to the church. You women here in the church, you men in the church, this should be our attitude towards the assembly. How we please the others. How we best minister to the others. What do you have to contribute? And we'll leave it there. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to speak to you. Approach me here in a minute and we'll have a talk. God bless you.
I'll soon be free from every trial, and this from will rest beneath the sun.